All right, welcome everybody. Let's do this. Lesson 39 with your boy, Mr. G. Okay, so the main idea for this lesson, let's go over it very quickly. And what I want you to do is please have this in your notes. It'll be very short. And I'm going to try and speed up my videos, but the idea is, let's imagine you had this polynomial, right? And you had to factor, okay? How would you factor this polynomial? Take your time and try and figure it out, right? But not too bad, it's just x plus 5, x minus 5, okay? And why does this work? Because if I do x times x, I get x squared. X times minus 5 is minus 5x plus 5x minus 25. Notice what happens to these two. They just, let me zoom in a little bit. These two just cancel, so now I have x squared minus 25. And you say, okay, not too bad, right? Now what about this one? How does this factor? Okay, and I want you to think about it, and whatever you do, check to see that it actually works. Okay, so by now you should feel frustrated. You should be like, Mr. G, it's not working. Like, imagine if you tried like, let's say if you tried x plus 5, x plus 5, which I'm sure a lot of you tried. But if you do it here, notice that you're going to get this 10x in the middle, and then you're going to say, oh, Mr. G, it's not possible. So not possible. And that's correct. It's not possible using real numbers. You cannot factor this using real numbers. So the idea for today's lesson is, how can we use I to factor something like this? So watch how it's going to be done. To factor this x squared plus 25, you're going to say x plus 5i, x minus 5i. Okay? And let's see, why does this work? Because here, if I have x times x, it's x squared. If I have x times minus 5i, it's minus 5ix. This is plus 5ix. Notice what happens to the negative and the positive. These two cancel. And now, let's see what happens here. Positive 5 times negative 5 is negative 25. And what is the I times the I? It's I squared. So notice I have x squared minus 25i squared. But remember, what does I squared equal? I squared equals negative 1. So we could substitute this negative 1 in here. And now we have this negative 25 times the negative 1, and it makes it positive 25. OMG, right? So that's the idea here with I. What I want you to do is try and just practice a few, just so you get the feel of it. Try doing this one by yourself. Like if I said, what's x squared plus, I don't know, let's say 100. How does that factor? And what if I had x squared plus 144? How does that factor, right? And if you, let's say you pause the video and you try and do it, this is just x plus 10i, x minus 10i, and it will work. This one will be x plus 12i and x minus 12i. Okie dokie. But remember, if I had something like x squared minus 100, then this is normal behavior, right? Just x minus 10, x plus 10. Okie dokie. So that's the big idea for this lesson. It's like, how do you use I to factor something like this? Okay. Now, the next question we have to look at, the second main idea, is what do you know about the graph for these two? Remember that we just solved this one, right? So this was what? X plus 5, x minus 5, and it equals 0. So here you say x equals negative 5, and here x equals 5. And then what's the connection between the solution and the graph? It represents the points on the x-axis that make the graph, right? So we know that the solutions are at 5 and negative 5, so they have to intersect the x-axis here. But what about this one? Here, notice that, how did this factor? This was x plus 5i and x minus 5i equals 0. So here, what do? You say x plus 5i equals 0, x equals negative 5i. So that's one of the solutions. And what's the other solution? It's x equals 5i. But the problem is, these two solutions are not on the x-axis. This graph over here will not intersect the x-axis because the solutions are complex. So if you have complex solutions, it won't intersect the x-axis. But if you have real solutions, it will intersect the x-axis. And that's the idea for the lesson. Like here, only the real solutions will intersect. And what do we mean to be real? Real just means does not have I. Okay? So even something like this is real. Something like this is real. Even -1/2. These are all real numbers. As long as it doesn't have I, it will hit the x-axis. But the second it has a complex solution over here, it will not intersect the x-axis. Okay? And that's it. So what would I like you to do for the next part? This part will be a little fun. But for this, just FOIL, right? And you'll get something. Okay, so here x times x times -I times x, and try that one. And you could try it for this one too. This one, don't do. Let's not waste our time on this one today. Just try these two. And then the next part, what I want you to do is try and factor these two. Okay? These two shouldn't be, well, this one's not too bad. This one will be a little weird. But just if you want to see how it's done very quickly, x times x is x squared. This is -ix plus ix minus I squared. And then this becomes x squared. These two cancels, minus I squared. But then that's x squared minus -1, because I squared is -1. And this becomes x squared plus 1. So notice, x squared plus 1, how does this factor? It factors as x plus I, x minus I. Okay? This one you should have been able to do yourself, but we already did this one. It's x squared plus 25. Okay? For this one here, this is just x plus 3i, x minus 3i. Okay? And how do you know when to use the i's and when to use not to use the i's? For example, this is what we call a difference of perfect squares, right? But if I have something like this, we say that this is a sum of perfect squares. Okay. All right, now what about for this one here? How does this one factor? Notice the idea for this, what's the square root of x? Like, how do you actually, what's the rhythm for this? You see, like, what's the square root of x squared? It's x and x. So that's what I'm kind of doing here. I say x, x, okay? Then what's the square root of 9? I say 3, 3, right? And that's the idea here. You say, what's the square root of 5? It has none. So what you're allowed to do is you're allowed to say x plus radical 5i, x minus radical 5i. And then why does this work? Like, hopefully if I FOIL this, I get x squared plus 5, right? Let's see if it works. X times x is x squared. X times this becomes -5i, square root of -5ix, plus square root of 5ix, and this becomes what? This becomes, now we got to take our time. What is square root of 5i times negative square root of 5i, right? That's what we're doing. We're multiplying these two. So let me see here. Let me move this. Okay, so what does this equal? Square root of 5 times square root of -25. That's, I'm sorry, square root of 5 times negative square root 5. This is negative square root 25i squared. But then this becomes negative, what's the square root of 25? It's 5i squared. But then this becomes -5 times -1, and that's just 5. Wow. Oh my God. So then this works. So this just becomes a plus 5. These two cancel, and I get x squared plus 5. Okay. This one was a little tricky with the square root 5i. But okay. For the next part, I'll make it in the next video. It's not too bad. All right, I'll see you.